Hi, this is Alex Pender at Kids in Need of Defense, and I'm here with Sara Clingan from Simpson Thacher, and we're honoring Sara this month as our Pro Bono Attorney of the Month because she has taken on several kind pro bono cases. So we are lucky enough to have her here to talk about the work that she's done pro bono for kind and all of the kids that she's helped. So thank you, Sara, so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So I'll just jump right in and get started asking you questions. So the first question that we have for you is, what was your biggest lesson learned or personal growth moment during this process of representing unaccompanied kids?
One of the things that I've learned, and which I don't think I fully appreciated until I'd done a couple of cases and been able to stay in contact with the children and see the children after the cases were over, but is the level of stress that going through these court proceedings places on the children, and that the way that they're able to grow once they're through the court process, once they're here in the United States, they're here lawfully in the United States, and we know that they're safe. So when I first started working with Kind, I had an idea that this court process, the idea of going through deportation proceedings, the risk of being deported back to their home countries where they were really in grave danger, was going to be a very stressful process for the children. But it wasn't until I finished some of the cases, kept in contact with the kids, and saw what they were able to do after they became lawful permanent residents and were here safely in the United States, to see the way that their personalities changed, the way that they smiled more, the way they were confident and more comfortable, that I was really to appreciate just how stressful just the process of being in deportation proceedings is on the children.
And through that process, kind of how did Kind help you in taking on all of these pro bono cases?
So Kind is really, really talented at placing attorneys with the right case for the attorney and for the child. So there have been times that I've had a lot of extra time on my plate at the firm that I've, wanted to take on a lot of pro bono work, and Kind has been great to find me, cases that were right in that wheelhouse at that time. And then there have been times where I've been really busy with other matters at my law firm, and Kind has been able to find me cases that weren't as time consuming, that has still allowed me to be doing that pro bono work that I wanted to be doing on the side. And then of course they're just phenomenal with the day-to-day logistical questions like what do you think is the optimal timing for putting through particular filings, how should I frame this issue for this particular judge, those sort of technical questions that those of us that maybe don't have a background in immigration law or in family law don't necessarily feel comfortable answering ourselves. It's nice to have a sounding board for those kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm. And then what would you say to an attorney who's maybe interested in taking a case or about to take on a pro bono case, but a little bit hesitant?
I think the biggest challenge, at least for the attorneys that I work with frequently in big law, is that they feel that they don't have the time. And I would say that's absolutely not true, especially with an organization as wonderful as Kind, which is able to work attorneys through some of the technical issues and the processes to sort of streamline the process.
And then could you talk a little briefly about one of the children that you have or are currently representing?
Sure. The one that comes to mind, because we just had her special immigrant juvenile status hearing yesterday, is a little girl named Zia. I started working with Zia because I was already representing her older sister in asylum proceedings, and her older sister just happened to mention off the cuff that she had a little sister who was also in deportation proceedings and had been here for 2 years and hadn't been able to find a lawyer, and was going to be deported if she wasn't able to bring a lawyer to her next hearing. So I said, of course we would be happy to take that case on. So I called Kind, and Kind did an intake memo with Zia and referred her case to me. And because I've been so fortunate to work with Kind on so many of these cases, it really wasn't a big time commitment for me at all. I think I probably spent a total of 20 hours working on Zia's case. And we went for her special immigrant juvenile status hearing yesterday. It was such a clear-cut case of special immigrant juvenile status. She was so clearly entitled to it under the law that the judge was actually able to rule on our motion papers at the status hearing without me having to argue the case or without even having to ask any sort of extensive questions, because it was just such a clear case under the law. which I think really clearly demonstrates the value that Kind provides. Because if this little girl hadn't had a lawyer, she would have been deported, and she wouldn't have had access to the legal remedies here in the United States that she was so clearly entitled to under the law. So yesterday we got to go out and celebrate her being able to stay here in the United States.
That is great to hear. And then on that, kind of, why would you say it's so important for attorneys to engage as advocates on these pro bono issues with unaccompanied children?
Well, I think Zia's case perfectly demonstrates that. Zia is a child who was under serious threat back in her home country of El Salvador. She was subject to really terrifying threats by gang members. Her older sister had actually been kidnapped by the MS-13 gang, and when her older sister was able to escape and come to the United States, they had made very explicit and terrifying threats against Zia. So it was clearly not safe for Zia to be returning to El Salvador. For her to be deported would have been an absolute death sentence. And she clearly had a remedy to stay here in the United States, but because she didn't have a lawyer, she was very nearly deported. Because Kind was able to get involved, she's able to stay here, and she's able to live her life safely here in the United States.
And because she had you representing her.
It's my pleasure to work with her.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Sara, and thank you for all of the amazing work that you've done for Kind and for all of the children that you've helped.
Well, thank you for making that possible for me.